Why am I always doing that? Governor Gavin Newsom and Governor Ron DeSantis recently had their big debut debate between governors. Sad to say, if DeSantis somehow ends up being the nominee against Newsom, who has stated he is not running for president, it will not go well for DeSantis. This morning, I discussed some hypocrisy from Newsom and what DeSantis should have said in the debate. All right. Good morning and welcome to another morning episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, then I want to especially thank you for giving me your time so early. All right. So we're doing a bill review. I think I've kind of dedicated Mondays to doing a bill review. This one I got a little behind on, mostly because I kind of slept in a little bit. That was an accident. I woke up and then I just kind of laid there. And then the next morning, the next thing I realized, like, hey, it's like 6 o'clock now, not 5 o'clock. I thought I was just going to lay there for like 10 minutes. Um, but then, even more importantly, I decided to do this particular bill last night. And this morning, I was having trouble finding some good video clips. I like to, include some video clips, especially on a bill review, because the bill review can just sometimes be a little bit dry. But that doesn't make them any less important. That just means the work on my behalf needs to be a little bit more so that I can make it kind of interesting. So let me know. Let me know if this bill, if I am able to make this bill review even somewhat interesting. So we will see. All right. So let's see what we got here. This bill, it's a California bill that requires VC firms to report on their number of investments in diverse founders. This is from Yahoo Finance. We'll put that up on the screen here. So what's going on is he signed a bill. This was like in early October. He signed a bill that would require venture capital firms to report how many of the people that they've invested, or the numbers, the diversity on the people that they invest in. Now, frankly, I'm actually kind of surprised they don't already have a bill for this. So I was kind of surprised that this is just now coming out. Not to say that it should already be out, just given California and all, and the way people talk about diversity, you kind of would think like, wow, you don't already have this, but like you didn't pass this bill like 10 years ago, like, because you guys have been crazy for a long time. So anyway, what's going on? So on October 8th, Governor Gavin Newsom signed Senate Bill 54, a law that mandates VC firms to release annual reports regarding the number of diverse founders they're investing in, making it the inaugural law focused on increasing diversity in VC funding in the US. In addition to providing information related to race, VC firms operating in California must report on disability status and sexual orientation of the individuals they provide funds to, the outlet details. The data from the reports will be available to the public. This is set to be enforced on March 1st, 2025, but ahead of that date, the bill's wording will be cleaned up due to, quote, problematic provisions and unrealistic timelines for Governor Newsom. We'll get to that in a moment. Additionally, he emphasized that the update is to ensure this important policy to improve the diversity of venture capital investments can be implemented properly. Let's see. Apparently there's a significant gap in funding that diverse led startups experience. Let's see. The outlet notes the tech advocate and fundraiser Allison Byers, who played a role in the law's formation, is on a mission to get similar bills established across the U.S. So we're already in discussion with leaders in other states and countries who are interested in enacting similar policies. Byers said, I believe that is who I have in my video clip is Allison Byers. So let's let's take a look at this video clip. I don't think I'm going to play the entire thing, and I might stop it, somewhere in between, so we can kind of have some conversation about this. So, this is at some point when they were discussing the bill, and it's a little on the boring side, but we're not going to play we're not going to play a whole lot of it. So,
Well, thank you. Thank you, Chair and committee members, for letting me come and testify today. My name is Allison Byers. I'm the founder of a tech startup called Scroobius. We are an AI-powered platform that connects diverse founders with investors.
okay. So, keep in mind what she just said, and then what we're talking about. We're talking about a bill that says that venture capitalists have to report the numbers regarding their investments to, people who are considered, uh, who are in the diversity space. I'm not really, it's like even describe this without sounding like a weirdo. But then she just said she's part of an organization that specifically connects them, right? So there's a law that they're trying to mandate that says you have to report on this because we see this as a problem. And one of the people that's pushing for this is a person who said, "I've created an organization, a business. Not even it's not even like a she she said it's a business. She has a business, right? So I assume she makes money off of this. So, all right. Just want to point that out that we're passing a law with somebody who's at the forefront who is making money off of solving the very problem that she's complaining about.
We've helped over 550 founders, the majority of whom identify as underrepresented, create their pitch material for fundraising.
Okay, so I guess that's how you talk about it. You say, "Do you identify as underrepresented?" That's how you talk about all these different groups that are included.
And we have witnessed the bias and injustice that they face in the fundraising process. I have experienced this personally many times, and it is why I started this company. So we see this injustice reflected in the numbers that we've all heard today, where of the $238 billion of venture capital allocated in 2022, women got 1.7% of that, Black founders less than a percent, Black women less than 0.35% of that money. I
Okay. So let's take a pause on this for a moment and then consider here that she has just identified a slew of statistics. Like this is how much money has been allocated. So there's a bill now that's going to say, "Hey, venture capitalist, what was how much did you give us a report on the investments to people who who identify as underrepresented?" And so we have the numbers apparently, right? Like they know the numbers of people, but now they want to break down because they want to know from each individual venture capitalist, what did you do? Okay. Now, what would the purpose of this be? Well, the purpose is clearly because they're going to make it public. It's clearly to make them look bad. Hey, venture capitalist A, they didn't uh, they didn't do nearly as much in giving money to people who are underrepresented as did venture capitalist B. That's all this is. Like, it's supposed to be, like this clever way of public shaming. You can just point to it and people can go look, and then they can get mad at the venture capitalist who didn't help out as many underrepresented people. All right, let's continue on.
challenge you to find another industry or resource in our country that has that level of disparity.
So that level of disparity may not necessarily be found in other avenues, but you do find significant disparities. And I don't have all the numbers, but like if you go look up like the Nobel Prize winners, there is a disparity there. There's a disparity in your NFL and NBA teams in the makeup of those. There are disparities in certain genres of music, right? Like th- th- these kind of disparities exist because different groups are interested in different things. And what that means is you have fewer numbers of those people and those people meaning any particular group that are in a particular space. So think of it this way. Let's take something like hockey. Now, I don't have the numbers from at the moment, but I know that hockey has a very, very low rate of black players, right? Compared to, like, say, the NBA. And what this means is that the black community just isn't as interested in hockey as they are in the NBA. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with this. There's nothing wrong with a group of people that find themselves being more interested in a particular space over another space. And so when you have something like the black community who is more interested, and we're just comparing two things. We're not saying that you're only interested in basketball. Okay. We're just saying when we compare and the NBA against the NHL, you have a vast, very clear difference. And that difference is a matter of between those two, the black community favors NBA. They do not favor the NHL. So therefore, the very, very few people in the black community who might want to be, think of it this way: if you have, let's say, only 1%, I'm just making up a number, only 1% make it to the NHL, right? Of all the hockey players. So if you have, like, say, 10 black people and only 1%, that's not even one person, right? Because 1 person would be 10% of 10 people. And so when you have a fewer number, that makes it harder when the percentages are already low. But when you look at the NBA, you see that there's quite a few black players. And the reason why there's quite a few black players is because there are so many in raw numbers that even though there's going to be a small percentage who actually make it, there are so many that that percentage ends up being a good handful. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. But anyway, let's keep listening, because ultimately they're trying to solve a problem here with laws, which I have a problem with.
This data comes from trusted sources like PitchBook and Crunchbase, yet they rely on industry partners and news sources because funds are not required to report their diversity metrics. And despite an increase in public rhetoric, 8 out of 10 investors view the funding landscape as balanced. Those investors are general partners of funds, and they manage money that comes from endowments, wealthy individuals, pensions like CalPERS, and other fiduciary backers. Is that where those investors want their money going?
So what she's saying is the venture capitalists basically get their money from elsewhere and they're not required to report these things. So then she's like, well, you know, the diversity, the rhetoric is up, but we're not seeing an improvement. And so the question is where the venture capitalist is where they're getting their money. Are those people, getting their money's worth in the diversity space? Well, let me tell you something, Ms. Byers. If I had if I was putting money into a venture capitalist to grow it, to invest it, I cared about the level of diversity that they're acquiring, yes, I would be looking into it. That's the nature of people spending their money. They spend their money, or they place their money, if you will. They place their money in places that they tend to know what is going on, right? So this question that she's asking doesn't even make sense. Like, do they even know this? Do they, like, maybe they don't know the exact numbers. So maybe the better question is, are they comfortable with how things are playing out right now? Probably are. They probably are comfortable. Why? Because it's their money and they're intentionally going out and saying, here, I want you to do this thing with my money. And so it's kind of an absurd question to be asking. All right, I think we're almost done with this clip of her. We're not going to play the whole 3 minutes here.
So, we have witnessed the positive impact of other bills that require data reporting in areas like board composition and diversity in the workplace.
Okay, this is going to get interesting in just a moment here. Okay, so we have witnessed similar bills in other spaces, and the success basically is what she's saying. Now, I'm not going to argue for or against on whether or not other bills have actually been successful. As a rule of thumb, when I look at bills, I tend to see that when you go first and foremost, a lot of times bills are solving a problem that's not really needed, at least for the government to solve. There may be a problem there, but the problem is better solved on the market. And so when I go and I look back at bills, I often go, yeah, it didn't really solve anything. But she says it is. She says that other bills have. Okay, cool. So we've seen some success out of other similar bills. We're going to hold on to that thought for just a moment.
This bill takes a crucial step toward rectifying the inequities in the funding landscape of venture capital by establishing accurate measurement and public availability that will foster accountability and progress.
Okay. So by fostering accountability and progress, what she means to say, since all this bill does is require venture capitalists to report on the diversity metrics, what she means to say in those words is that it's going to now be part of the public rhetoric. And so it's going to basically gin up anger and resentment at specific individuals. That's really all this bill is doing because it's not requiring them to actually have any level of diversity. So it's a lot more sneaky in that sense, right? Now, let's move on. I think we're done with this. So I want to and let's see here. I meant to share this one first, but let's see if we want to go through here. Main takeaway. So this is from SB 54 increases transparency in California's venture capital industry. Main takeaway, venture capital firms and other investors should work with counsel now to determine whether they are, quote, covered entities. That's how the bill describes them under SB 54 and ensure they are prepared to comply with SB 54's reporting requirements, which will look back to the 2024 calendar year. Compliance procedures and information gathering processes should be in place, blah, blah. Okay, let's see here. Let's skip down here to the criteria for venture capital company to be covered entity include two prongs. The first pertains to the venture capital company's activities, and the second addresses whether those activities sufficiently touch California. So this is basically very focused in California and to what degree their impact in California is. And then what information needs to be reported? So here it is. Covered entities need to provide annual information on the founding teams of all businesses that it has made venture capital investments into for the prior year. A quote founding team member unquote is defined as any person who falls into one of two categories: a person who owned initial shares of the company, contributed to the business before the initial share issuance, and was not simply a passive investor. And then two, a chief executive officer, president, chief financial officer, manager of a business, or who has been designated with a role similar level authority of any of those positions. So basically, this is going to be like who is the founding team member? Who are the people that are the C level in these new organizations? Covered entities need to provide aggregate demographic information on founding teams pertaining to race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, veteran status, and California residency, and disclose whether any founding team members declined to provide such information. Further, covered entities must provide information on the number of investments to and investments amounts in portfolio company. So basically, if you invest, like maybe not directly in a team, but you invest in something else, you got to report on that too. Let's see. A diverse founding team member is defined as founding team member who self-identifies as a woman, non-binary, Black, African American, Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Asian, Pacific Islander, Native American, Native Hawaiian, Alaskan Native, disabled, veteran, or disabled veteran, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer. Now, I want to throw out here that they don't care. I'll highlight this real quick. They don't care if you identify as a man, which I find is interesting because we've had this conversation about, what is a woman and all that. And there are transgender folk who will go from they will say, I was born a man or I was born in a male body, but I am a woman. But here, apparently, if it's the other way around, you don't matter. I mean, I guess they could say you fall under transgender, but it's interesting that they specifically identify woman in this space. So if you identify as a man, even though maybe you're not born a man, then you're not listed here. So that I find that kind of interesting, because there's been this argument like, hey, it seems like men keep winning, the patriarchy keep winning because they can just go and identify as a woman, and then they get all these privileges of being a woman. But it seems like identifying as a man doesn't come with those kind of benefits. Kind of interesting there. All right. And so then it just goes on here and talks about the process and what happens if you fail to meet them. If you fail to meet these obligations, there is a penalty. It's not report. If the report is not filed by the deadline, the Civil Rights Department, so this is involving the Civil Rights Department, will provide notice. Report must then be filed within 60 days. If they fail to, then the California Civil Rights Department may file a petition and seek compelled compliance, payment of a penalty, attorney's fees, and other relief as determined by a court. So if you don't do this, you are fined. Okay, you get a fine. And then it just goes on and kind of lays out some more of the information. All right. So that's good enough for now. We will move on from that. So now I want to point out something. So remember a moment ago we were listening to Ms. Allison Byers, and she said that reporting in other areas has been beneficial. Like they've seen the benefit of requirements in other areas of this kind of reporting. Well, I came across something. This was like at the last minute. So this was very, very interesting. So this comes from calmatters.org. I don't know anything about the website itself, but they're reporting, and this is where I learned about the hypocrisy with Governor Newsom and with with Governor Newsom between this bill, which is SB 54, and another bill, SB 702. So let's see, going down here. So I'm gonna read parts of his veto message. So he vetoed one bill and he passed another bill, and I'm gonna read both of those. But this article points out that he did not look so favorable. There it is. The governor looked less favorably on SB 702 by Senator Monique Limon, a Santa Barbara Democrat who has spent the past 3 years trying to pass a law documenting the diversity of gubernatorial appointments. All right. So Newsom again rejected her latest. So this is not the first time that he's rejected it, which would have required the governor's office starting in 2026 to annually publish aggregate demographic information of appointees to state boards and commissions in the previous year, including their ethnicity, gender, disability status, region, party affiliation, and veteran status. Now, that's kind of interesting, party affiliation. All right, so let's take a look at his memo. So apparently, when he signs a bill or when he rejects a bill, he apparently puts out a memo regarding that. So let's take a look here, and we're gonna kind of go through this one really quickly here. So this one is for Senate Bill 54. I think we can make it a little bigger here. This bill requires, and this is from the office of the governor. He says, I'm signing Senate Bill 54. So this is the venture capital one. This bill requires venture capitalists to report to the Civil Rights Department on the diversity of the founding members of businesses in which they invested during the prior year. This bill resonates deeply with my commitment to advance equity and provide for greater economic empowerment of historically underrepresented communities. For example, the California Equal Pay Pledge was launched in 2019 to turn the nation's strongest equal pay laws into the smallest pay gap and has secured more than 100 corporate commitments, reaching hundreds of thousands of employees. Building on this work, I signed legislation last year strengthening the state's pay data reporting. Okay, we'll skip all that, blah, blah, blah. However, this is the fun, this is fun. However, this bill contains problematic provisions and unrealistic timelines that could present barriers to successful implementation and enforcement. within California's large and complex venture capital environment. This bill would require CRD to undertake significant and ongoing investigations just to determine whether any given entity meets the criteria set forth in the bill, and the department is not situated to perform this work. Additionally, establishing this expertise as well as any resultant work from administering the law creates significant ongoing general fund cost pressures. What is he saying here? He's saying, I'm passing this bill. I'm going to sign this bill that may not even actually work because of the way it's written, but it meets my commitment of, what do you say? My commitment to advance equity and provide for greater economic empowerment of historically underrepresented communities. So he likes the idea of the bill, but recognizes that California isn't ready for this bill. It looks to me like it says this bill would require CRD, the Civil Rights Department, to undertake significant and ongoing investigations just to determine whether any given entity meets the criteria. In other words, we don't have this, we don't have the manpower to do this. We do not have the resources. And then it looks like he said creates significant ongoing general fund cost pressures. So it looks like he's saying we don't have the manpower, we don't have the funding, and the timeline of this bill isn't going to work anyway, right? Because it could be problematic. Where is it? Problematic provisions and unrealistic timelines. So that could present barriers to successful implementation and enforcement. So we're not ready for this bill, but we got to have this bill. Is that crazy? It's insane. He passed a bill they're not even ready to deal with, nor do they have any provisions or any layout of how it's going to work. They haven't figured out. They're just like, we're going to pass this bill. Now, here's the surprise, sort of. That's how a lot of bills get passed. like a lot of bad stuff. All right, so now let's look at this other bill, 702. No, we're not gonna look at the bill. We're not doing the. I'm not really reading the bills because I usually try to, but those bills were so dry, and this topic is not exactly that exciting. But I want to try to pull this off anyway. So let's take a look at this bill. Now, this bill is, I'm sorry, this memo about Senate Bill 702. I'm returning Senate Bill 702 without my signature. This bill would require the governor's office to annually publish a report on its website containing aggregate demographic information of individuals appointed by the governor. I continue to be deeply committed to making appointments at every level of the government that reflect California's diversity. My office makes an intentional, transparent effort to continuously engage with the legislature, community partners, nonprofits, and other stakeholders to build a diverse and qualified pool of candidates to these positions. I'm deeply proud of the diverse group of Californians who now serve our state in senior appointed leadership positions. While I understand the author's goal, the demographic information specified for reporting under this bill is optional and self reported by candidates. Consequently, the report required by this bill would not necessarily accurately reflect the diversity of appointees. I have vetoed a similar measure for this reason, and my concern remains. Here's my take. I'm just gonna. I'm like, I don't know if this is really his honest opinion. Here's my take. He doesn't want to be held accountable like he wants to hold other people accountable. So he's finding reasons that he doesn't have to pass this bill. This is not the first one. And if we go back and we look at this other one, he said this bill contains problematic provisions and unrealistic timelines that could present barriers to successful implementation and enforcement. So it was okay to pass one bill that they weren't ready to implement that could be a problem and fail. But then another bill, this bill over here, he's like, well, I get your goal, but it's self-reported by Ken. That's what it is, self-reporting. And we just read that over, where is it here? Let's go back to this page here. It says a diverse founding team member is defined as a founding member who self identifies as, and then it lists all these things. So now this isn't the legal, this is like just a website reporting on it and talking about it. But the idea is that it's self identifying. So the venture capitalists have to report on information, even if, when these, they have to report on how people self identify. They're required. They could be punished with financial, they could be financially punished if they don't report on self identification of the founding teams that they invest in. But the governor, he's like, well, self identification, like that's going to mess up the reporting. That's not going to be really accurate, because it's self identified. Yes, governor, that is the nature of this. So, what does it have to do with Ron DeSantis? Well, I watched the debate with Ron DeSantis and him. I watched most of it. I didn't watch all of it because it was kind of, Ron DeSantis was getting beat up. Like the fact of the matter is that Gavin Newsom, he is a slick tongue politician, if there ever was one. That you could go out and you can find tons of videos where he is basically doing that. In that particular debate. He weaseled his way out of answering anything. Like at one point, the moderator Sean Hannity tried to directly ask him and said, "Look, it has been you're well known for not answering questions. So let me ask you a direct question." And he just kind of weaseled his way right on out of it. And Sean Hannity did his best to try to get an answer out of him, and he didn't. And then Ron DeSantis came in and he was all like, "All right, look, here's some facts, here's some facts, here's some facts." What he should have done is he should have said, "Look, Governor Newsom, you just passed a bill that would require venture capitalists to report on the diversity of the teams that they invest in. But then you also rejected a similar bill that would hold you to the same standard." And then he could have just said, rather than trying to force Gavin Newsom to apologize or admit, he should have just used that kind of an opportunity to say, "Look, California venture capitalists, we have no such bill. Why don't you come out to the great state of Florida and start investing there? And if you find good people that you want to invest in who happen to be in what we call underrepresented communities, then invest them. And if they happen to be white people, because that's really what it means, really. I mean, let's be honest. This is really white males versus everyone else. That's really what it's about. So he could have just said, look, whoever you invest in is who you invest in. We're not going to sit there and try to dictate your reporting and what you have to do. And we're certainly not going to punish you financially if you don't do it. That's what he could have said. And he should have done that through he should have been like, "Governor Newsom, this is the law you passed. Guess what, folks? We don't have such a law. Come out to Florida." He should have just used the whole platform rather than trying to argue and debate and win. He should have just used the platform to say, "You know what? Here are more reasons for you to move to Florida. We've got great sunny weather. True enough, if you're where I am up in Jacksonville, up in, the Northeast, or, maybe in the Panhandle, yeah, it can get cold a little bit. So that could be a little on the rough side, but we've got plenty of spots, Orlando on down, that are nice and warm. And instead of, instead of, uh, instead of earthquakes, you deal with hurricanes. Like, difference. But that's what he should have done. He should have used his platform to encourage more Californians to move out here, under the basis of we do not have these kind of laws. Now, I want to start wrapping this up a little bit. I want to show something that I think is absolutely amazing, because whenever you criticize these kind of bills, the first thing that people do is they're like, "Oh, well, you just don't want black people to get all these opportunities, and you just don't want women to have these opportunities." Blah, blah, blah. And that's garbage. Absolute garbage. So there's a gentleman, his name is Clarkson Lawson. I love following him on Twitter, and he has some of the most awesome, short, right to the point, communications about ideas. So let me play this one here. Let me bring him up on the screen. So this is Clarkson Lawson. He's gonna play this real clip. This clip, it's only like 1 minute. So this is pretty awesome. I love it. So let me ask you something. Do you have like producers that are they all black? No, my producers was white. I don't use black. I use good. Oh, you use good, good. Yeah, I don't. When you first get to Hollywood and you do black show, everybody like, "Oh, you got to put all black people." All black people ain't good. All white people ain't good.
What she just said is the most beautiful yet simple argument against forced diversity programs. A common misconception about people who are against diversity, equity, and inclusion programs is that we don't like diversity or we don't want diversity, but that's not the case. The problem with diversity metrics when hiring is that you're putting an emphasis on the candidate's immutable characteristics, whether it is race, sexuality, or sex. Now, the thing about immutable characteristics in a person is that they are not indicative of how that person behaves or the choices they make. So, when those characteristics become a determining factor in giving someone a job, we are no longer putting an emphasis on the individual's decision and their merit. Rather, we're putting an emphasis on things they cannot control. This means the quality of work that employee provides will potentially decrease because we're no longer focusing on how good they can do the job. This then trickles down to everything, whether it's goods or services. The individual who is most qualified for the job should not lose the opportunity just because they were born with X amount of pigmentation in their skin or a male or female.
All right. He's absolutely correct. Now he's talking about jobs in specific, right? And that was that clip. She was like, look, I don't hire black people. I hire good. In other words, if you happen to be black and you happen to be good at what I'm looking for, I'm going to hire you. If you happen to be good and you happen to be white, and the black person that was coming to me, competing for that particular position wasn't as good as you, then I'm hiring the white person. That's what she said. Right. And he's absolutely correct. People don't really care. They really don't about, um, they're not bothered by the idea of diversity and, inclusion. Not that they're bothered by them. They're bothered by them because that becomes the focus, or the focus becomes, as he said, on their immutable characteristics. Now, jump on over to this venture capital bill. They're not necessarily requiring any at the moment. They're not requiring that there be any particular percentages that are met. All they're doing is starting that process. They're saying, "Look, you need to report on this, and if you don't give us a report, we're going to fine you, and you're going to be held accountable financially." And they don't even know what like, the bill doesn't even describe what that looks like yet, right? So it's unclear what kind of fines there are going to be. And they're doing this because they're saying, like, well, we want to increase diversity. We see this problem. Like, only these small percentages of blacks and women and so on and so forth are getting, access to this venture capital, and that's just not fair. And so what Clarkson is saying was, like, he's saying in the job space, we shouldn't hire people based on an immutable quality, because that's going to end up meaning that the quality of the work is going to go down. Well, the same thing would happen in venture capitalism. If you start the process where you say, hey, we want you to report this, and people are being pressured through public pressure to invest, then the investments may end up going down. In other words, you might see more investments in in failed ventures, right? That's what you might end up seeing. Now, that's not to say that these underrepresented communities are just no good. What that's saying is, when that becomes the focus, then the focus is no longer on what is your idea? Do you have a good idea? And there are certainly women, black folk, and Native Americans, and Alaskans, and all, veterans and disabled veterans. There are people of all sorts that have good ideas, but there are many more people who don't, right? Like, that's just the way it is. Like, a lot of people, like, what do they say in the restaurant business? Like, what is it? Something like 1 out of every 10 restaurants fails. Why is that? Because it's tough. Because competing in the marketplace is tough. But interestingly enough, the governor doesn't seem to think that he needs to have these rules applied to him. He's had similar bills come to him multiple times. And apparently, at no time did he say, you know what, I got to pass this bill, and we'll clean up the language after the fact. We'll make sure that, you know, this bill can be successful. But he did that for the venture capitalist bill. He was like, hey, you know what, there's some problems here. And unfortunately, the problems had nothing to do with the venture capitalists. Like, no, that all the requirements on them were just fine. It was a question of, do we have the resources and the personnel to make this happen? Nope, we don't. So we're going to have to clean that up a little bit later. We're going to have to figure out our funding, yada, yada, yada. Okay. So the bill was, it was good enough for the venture capitalists to pass a shoddy bill that wasn't even ready and that California is not ready for, but it's not good enough to pass a bill that does the same exact requirements for the governor himself, right? Rules for the rules for thee, not for me, right? That's really what it ends up being. Title of this show. So that's what Governor DeSantis should have went after. He should have just, rather than trying to pin him down and make him, say uncle, if you will, politically, he should have just been like, you know what? I'm the governor of Florida. I happen to be running for the, president, and here's my pitch to you to come to Florida. I'm not trying to give advice to a candidate from another party. I know I'm a libertarian, and I'm not voting for Ron DeSantis anyway. I haven't voted for him, nor will I vote for him. But I want to point out, this should have been his pitch. And honestly, I think he's going to lose no matter who. Like, I don't think he's going to win the nomination. And if he did win the nomination, it depends on who is running. Like, if he runs against Joe Biden, maybe he could probably win then. But if he runs against Governor Newsom, DeSantis will not win. I'm going to call that right now. We can look back up on this episode if that happens, and we can find out, hey, look, DL was a bit prescient in this because he called it a long time ago. Anyway, folks, all right, that's my show for today. Thank you for watching. I apologize for being at 10 minutes late. I was trying to work this out so I could make this bill review, somewhat interesting. Sometimes these bills are a little dry, and then I usually hope to go and find some media that kind of make it a little bit more interesting. And in this case, the media that I found didn't quite do so. But anyway, nonetheless, I did it. Let me know in the comments whether or not I was successful at keeping this from being too terribly dry and boring. If not, I'll do better. I'll just continue on until I get good. Right? You're investing in me with your time, and you want good. You don't care that I'm 20% Native American, nor should you. So let me know. Hey, DL, that wasn't so good. Step up your game, and I will. Or let me know, like, hey, not so bad. Keep it up. Hope you get better. Cool. Take that as well. But anyway, be sure to catch me every morning, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern, for an informed discussion on politics and culture. And then again, Sundays at 7 p.m., where me and Susan Hogarth, we look across the vastness of tyranny in this country, and we bring the news of what's going on with the Libertarian Party, the third largest political party in the United States, the only third party that you really need to worry about. And I want you to make sure that you are subscribed to my YouTube and Rumble channels. You can go to youtube.libertydad.com. You can also go to rumble.libertydad.com. Please make sure that you subscribe, drop a comment in there. Let me know how I'm doing. Your communication to me lets me know whether I need to step things up or what things you like or don't like. Lastly, I want you to remember that if you are a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you tomorrow morning